Good evening and welcome to 365 Days of Amazing Stories with Theo Mera. Here we are on day 78, and I'm continuing the story of 12 iron sandals. Now remember, the princess had spent the entire evening pulling needles out of her husband's body. And there was his face and a hand left to pull needles out of when the wicked daughter of the magician entered the room and told her that she must get out and never return unless she had something more priceless than the necklace. The princess had pointed to her ears, where she had in each one exquisite earrings made of the most precious and clear jewels. The evil daughter of the magician, the enchanter, she said, "And what would you like for these?" The princess, of course, said that she wanted to spend another night in the bedchamber of the king. Well, you could imagine what went back and forth. Again, that evil enchantress, she did not want to give in to that, but she saw there was no other way. She thought, certainly no harm can come, for it did not come on this night. So she agreed and told the princess to come back as the sun went down. The princess returned. She had tried to tend her hands the entire day, putting a salve on them to heal all of the wounds from having pulled those needles out one by one. They were still swollen and still very painful, but she was determined. She was determined this time to succeed in pulling all of those needles out, and felt certain that because she was, this time ready for what she would see, it would go more easily. She had expected that when she entered the king's bedchamber, that certainly all that would remain is the needles that had been left. But when she was led in by that evil enchantress, she saw that there were even more needles in his body than there had been on that first evening. Not being dismayed in the least, she began immediately to pull those needles out, and her already swollen fingers began to bleed that much more easily than the night before. Ignoring the pain, she kept after each one after another, the needles coming out of the king's body, and as they did, his body relaxing, regaining its color, his breathing becoming more easy. She was not keeping track of the time. She was not paying attention to it at all. She was just focused on her task. At one point, she realized that the bedchamber was lightening. The dawn was coming. And she still had many needles in his face. She continued until all that was left were needles in his eyelids. But they were so small that every time she tried to pull one out, it seemed she just pushed them more deeply into his skin. But on she labored, needle after needle. There were no more than a dozen needles left in each eyelid when the creak of the key in the lock startled the princess. Holding on to needles, The evil enchantress grabbed hold of her shoulder and pulled her away from the king. Get out of here. Get out of here before I get angry. The princess rose up and took a couple of steps away from the king's bed, and then turned and looked back at the evil enchantress and held out her left hand, on which was the most beautiful gem-filled ring. The princess said, "This diamond alone is worth more than your entire palace. And what do you want for it?" "The same as before. One more night with your husband, the king." The enchantress agreed, but said, "No woman can get away with being with another's husband this often. After this night you shall be punished. In the morning you shall be beheaded. Do you agree?" The princess said yes, and with tears streaming from her eyes, feeling that she could lose nothing more, she exited the room to go try to take care of her wounded fingers and hands. And we'll leave the story there. Not looking so great for the princess. Okay, thanks for joining. Have a good rest of your day or evening.